about the lawsuit that got filed. It says Wells Fargo, Ms. Jacobson said in interviews, New York Times, saw the black community as fertile ground for subprime mortgages, as working-class blacks were hungry to be part of the nation's home-growing mania. Loan officer, she said, in an affidavit, stated that employees referred to blacks as mud people and to subprime lending as ghetto loans. I can't tell you how hard it is for me to even say that. Y'all targeted black churches. I'm not going to defend that. That doesn't even deserve defense. I'm going to ask you one question. Does this organization reflect you?
All right, guys. So once again, we got to talk about woke capitalism. And this time it is starring Wells Fargo, who has a history of what some people would call systemic racism against so-called minorities and people of color, as whistleblowers back in 2009-ish, okay, the late 2000s, essentially admitted that Wells Fargo had targeted black people with what they call ghetto loans, right? And they called black people mud people as well, too. So they targeted them with subprime mortgage loans, basically bad loans, and it got called out and sued for it. Now, fast forward almost a decade later, like all of these woke companies that feel guilty about their past sketchy practices, they are trying to fix racism with more racism. And in this case, Wells Fargo allegedly is cutting back on their mortgage business and will focus on lending to minorities, right? So they're cutting back their mortgage business and focus on lending to minorities. Now, before I get into what this sounds like, right, because it is what it sounds like, that's what it is to me, we got to talk about the upcoming economic conditions in 2023, which do not look good, okay? The chance of recession, according to a lot of these big banks, a lot of these analysts, is over 50%, right? I mean, we most certainly are going to have a major recession at some point this year, evidenced by the fact that a lot of financial firms are pulling back on, spending. A lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of layoffs are happening. I mean, I would argue that we're already in a recession. However, this time we're going to have the big recession where even the mainstream liberal media won't be able to deny that we are in fact in a recession. It could be damn near a depression. Despite the good jobs report coming from the Biden administration that they are bragging about, a lot of these jobs that are being added are ghost jobs. They're not real jobs. They're actually really part-time jobs that people are taking on because inflation is roaring, okay, much more than what the feds are telling us. And they're having to take on these part-time jobs just to pay the bills, right? Just to get by. It's a terrible situation. Also, if you are a content creator, and you make money off of, advertising or whatever, you will notice for the most part that, you're not making as much money on ads because companies aren't spending as much money on advertising. Okay. They're not advertising their products as much. A lot of companies cutting back on spending because the economic conditions that are coming up in 2023 do not look good. Okay. And it seems to me that the market is probably overvalued. I think that there's probably most likely going to be some sort of crash coming up here soon, as again we have a short rally that is happening because there is optimism around the declining inflation numbers that are, in my opinion, understated, and the idea that feds may stop hiking interest rates at the historic rate that they're hiking them. However, I just think that this economy and the market is built on a house of cards, and it's about to fall, because the unfortunate reality is that the economic conditions are not good and money is not cheap anymore, which is a recipe for disaster. Evidenced by the fact that, again, you have companies like Wells Fargo that are shuttering major parts of their business. So before I get into what appears to be some systemic racism coming from Wells Fargo, in the sense that a part of them cutting their mortgage lending business, it seems like they're not lending to whites anymore. At least that's what it sounds like. I want to play a couple news clips here so you guys can get a better understanding of what is happening to Wells Fargo in their business. So let's go ahead and roll the clips.
We have breaking news on Wells Fargo and Overtime. The bank, which used to be the #1 mortgage lender in the U.S., is stepping back from the housing market in a very big way. CNBC.com's Hugh Sohn just broke that story. He joins us more. Hugh, what can you tell us here?
Hey, Scott, good to be with you. So first of all, the thing you have to know about Wells Fargo is this was their pride and joy, the U.S. mortgage business. This was the generator of a lot of their profits over the years. And as recently as 2019, they were the biggest mortgage lender in the country. So what they're saying now today is, instead of going for everybody they could, and really up to a 40 or 50% market share, which was their previous aspiration under previous leadership, they're saying we're only going to sell mortgages if you're an existing customer or if you happen to reside in a minority neighborhood.
The market's so bad that Wells Fargo's getting out of it entirely. Hugh, is that how we should read this story, or is there more to it?
Well, that's not untrue, Kelly. So part of it is that the market has collapsed. Interest rates much higher still. In the third quarter, the Wells Fargo mortgage volume was down about 60%.
Wow.
I think for the 4Q, it's going to be even worse than that because the year-over-year comp is going to look scary. So that's the proximate sort of reason. Then you look at sort of the bigger picture. Their peers, Bank of America and JP Morgan, have already sort of fled the market because they consider it too risky. If you remember the financial crisis in which mortgages played a central sort of key risk and role,
sure.
The regulation got a lot harsher, and they would call it onerous. So as a result, they left, and Wells Fargo stuck around in the party because they were making a lot of money on this until basically, they started giving back that money in the form of fines, series of OCC, Fed, CFPB
one thing after
fines
the other
about their performance in servicing these mortgages and in collecting and executing on the payments and the foreclosures in which they had troubles.
So they're getting out of this business. Someday it will come back. It may take decades. I don't know at this point, but
Yeah. So you seen that, you heard that. This is the cost of borrowing trillions and trillions of dollars and putting it into an already heated economy and then overheating it until we have historic inflation that the only way we can bring it down or stop it is to raise interest rates at a rapid pace, which basically paralyzes businesses' ways of growing, okay? A business needs to borrow capital in order to grow. Capital has become more expensive because interest rates are going up, which is basically tanking the economy, okay? The feds are literally tanking the economy on purpose, and it just hasn't caught up with us yet in regards to the market, but it is definitely something that is being felt across the country. So with that being said, let's talk about Wells Fargo and this policy they have where they're going to only focus on minorities, okay? They're cutting their mortgage business, which is one of the mortgage, biggest businesses that they have, right? And they're saying, look, we're only going to give out loans to minorities, right? Or people that live in minority neighborhoods, a.k.a., poor folks, right? Or people who are not white, okay? AKA, we're going to target non-whites. Again, this to me sounds like racism. Wells Fargo, once the number one player in lending out mortgages, announced it was taking a step back from its previous goal of reaching as many Americans as possible, aka whites. Instead, it will now focus on home loans for existing bank and wealth management customers and borrowers in minority communities. Again, aka not whites. Okay, they're like, we don't want to reach whites anymore. We only want to try to lend money to so-called minorities. Okay, and the way they try to say that it's not racist is they say, well, we're targeting minority communities. Okay, we're not saying that just only, black people or so-called minorities can get loans and white people can't. We're just saying that if you so happen to live in a minority community, which means that you live in a neighborhood that is overwhelmingly not white, we'll lend to you. Now, again, is it going to be, a good loan, a fair loan? No, it's going to be a loan with a super high interest rate, and they're probably going to make a whole lot of money off of it, and they're going to be taking advantage of these people. But hey, they're woke, right? They're being woke. We're not lending to whites anymore, so it's okay. Absolutely incredible. The financial services company highlighted its plan to leave the correspondent business with plans to reduce the size of its servicing portfolio. The bank will focus its home lending business to individuals and families in minority communities, aka people who most likely are not white, right? Again, amazing. Quote, we are making the decision to continue to reduce risk in the mortgage business by reducing its size and narrowing its focus. Kyber Santos, CEO of Consumer Lending, said in a press release. Specifically, the bank stated it was going to expand its retail team by focusing on existing bank customers and underserved communities, aka not whites, invest an additional $100 million to advance racial equity in home ownership, aka give $100 million to not whites, right? Deploying additional home mortgage consultants in local minority communities, aka tried to sell these mortgages to non-whites. Right? Yeah, pretty clear what's going on here. Quote, we will continue to expand our programs to reach more customers in underserved communities by leveraging our strong partnerships with the National Urban League, Unidos US, and other nonprofit organizations. Christy Furcho, head of home lending and head of diverse segments, representation and inclusion at Wells Fargo, added, quote, we also will hire additional mortgage consultants in communities of color. Wow, amazing stuff. Despite the fact that they know they're going to lose money in 2023, they're still trying to be woke about it, okay? They're still trying to maintain the wokeness. The wokeness should be the first thing to be cut in economic conditions like this. But again, it's not about profit anymore, guys. It's about changing the culture, right? It's about changing society. It's not about profit anymore. It's absolutely amazing. The press release highlighted that $150 million will also be used to serve minority communities looking to refinance or buy a home, helping more Black and Hispanic families achieve home ownership. Again, there are no white families that need this help, right? No poor white people, even though the most poor people in this country happen to be white, okay? There are more poor white people in this country than anybody. They don't need help. Only Blacks and Hispanics. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. These changes have been implemented as the lending market has collapsed as the Federal Reserve continues to raising rates to combat inflation, putting into question the long-term profitability of consumer lending. Wells Fargo also garnered scrutiny in 2016 from its fake accounts scandal when it opened at least 3.5 million fraudulent accounts for unfitting customers. We know what they're doing. We know what they're doing. They're trying to be woke. And they're trying to say, well, we're doing this for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But really what they're doing is that they are targeting people who don't know any better, okay, with probably sketchy loans. That's what they're doing in a high interest rate environment. So again, we know these loans are going to be expensive loans for anybody that gets a home mortgage loan today in today's environment. It's going to be expensive. They're not going to, most likely, they're not going to have a whole lot of money for a down payment. Again, this is nothing but money for Wells Fargo here, okay? But they're doing it in the name of wokeness, okay? Quote, we are acutely aware of Wells Fargo's history since 2016 and the work we need to do to restore public confidence. Consumer lending chief Kleber Santos told CNBC, quote, as part of that review, we determined that our home lending business was too large, both in terms of overall size and its scopes, aka too many whites, right? We had too many whites. When the Post reached out for clarification on whether the reduction in the mortgage lending space would take place and who exactly would be negatively impacted, Wells Fargo declined any further. Yeah, because they don't want to expose themselves and overtly say that they're not lending to whites anymore. Put it this way, they're not targeting whites. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you're white and you showed up, they probably give you a loan, but they're just not targeting you, okay? They're saying, look, you got to live in a minority community, okay? If you don't live in a minority community neighborhood, then I guess they don't want to give you a loan. I'm not entirely sure, but that's what it sounds like. And all I know is if these woke companies, these woke financial institutions, if they happen to go under during this next recession or depression that's about to come up, no bailout, right? No bailout for them because they were being racist, okay? No bailout. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.